Welcome, Lars. I'm so honored to have you on today. I am just grateful that you're here with us. First of all, how the heck are you? 2020 has been a roller coaster. How are you today?
Yeah, today I'm actually really good. I'm based outside of DC, and we got our first snow of the year. And I'm a dad to two amazing little girls who adore snow. So had a chance to get outside and play in the snow. And yeah, it's been a fun day.
It's awesome to see you kind of living life and spending time with family. And as you and I are getting to know each other, I want to make sure that the audience gets to know you. Whoever's listening right now is really in alignment with who you are and how you think. So can you give us a quick background?
Yeah, well, I'm a dad, as I mentioned. That's probably where I'd start. I'm a husband. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a author, podcaster. I've got a lot of interests, I guess. I've been in the kind of HR and recruiting and talent space for a little over 20 years. A lot of that time I was in-house running talent teams at Ticketmaster and Magento and NPR. And I've been out on my own with my own company for about 7 years now. My firm is Amplify. I do a mix of strategic consulting and HR executive search through that. And then kind of around that, I write for a fast company where I cover kind of modern HR and work practices. Host a podcast called Redefining HR, and about to publish my second book actually any day now from when this airs, called Redefining HR as well. So yeah, really, I get to spend a lot of my time in the kind of the innovative wing of the HR field, the kind of emerging wing that is really focused on where things are heading, and just a very significant shift from kind of the legacy orientation of HR's past. So I nerd out on that stuff, and I feel fortunate that I get to spend time with a lot of companies and chief people officers and CHROs who are doing really innovative work in the space.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And as you mentioned, you have a diverse set of interests that are extremely relevant today. And as we talk with anyone on the show, I always want to make sure that we have a good understanding about what drives this passion. Like, where does this fuel come from? What prevailed in your life that has gotten you to where you are today? So, can you give us just a glimpse of what the inspiration is to this focus on innovative HR?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was really fortunate throughout my career, but especially early in my career, to have some tremendous mentors who I worked for, and they kind of set a vision for me and a path of what modern HR was at a time when, like, that wasn't really a wide scale thing. And so I always viewed, I know I'm weird in this way, but I always viewed HR in that modern way, because those are the mentors that I worked for. Those are the environments that I worked in. And so as I, kind of got older and, got older age wise, but also kind of matured in my career, it was really important for me to kind of to pass that on and to take a lot of those, the time and the effort that people invested in my development, and find ways to kind of put that back into the industry. And so I got involved in a range of different, open source projects. I co-founded a not-for-profit called HR Open Source. All of my editorial projects, they're really all aimed at like identifying modern practices and shining a light on them so that other practitioners can, emulate that work. They can borrow some of those practices. They can do their own versions of those things, but essentially they can, up level their capabilities, and through that, their impact. And I think when they do that, they're better for it. Their companies are better for it, and their employees are better for it. So that the ability to have make magnitudes of impact, I think in that work is something that is hugely rewarding for me, but also motivating.
Yeah, for sure. So, given that you've gone super deep on this, and I would argue that short of the notable PhD, you've gone a PhD in HR essentially, and you're releasing a book called Redefining HR. What's that all about, and what's your biggest lesson that you've taken away from all of your research?
Yeah, I mean, so redefining HR is basically, it's the culmination of all of those embarrassingly long laundry list of things that I've been working on over the last 5 years. I've had this really unique kind of perch on the industry through my networks and through my work, where I've been able to see how the field of HR has evolved. And the book was, I host podcasts, I write articles. I wanted to do something that was probably more comprehensive and frankly more lasting than a piece of content. And the book was really my way of kind of, distilling all of the conversations, all of the the learnings, all of the research, everything that I've been focused on over the last 5 years into one kind of consolidated artifact that people can read and take with them. I think the biggest thing that I've learned in all that is that, the field of HR is not homogenous. A lot of people paint HR with a broad brush and they apply, legacy stereotypes to the function that just aren't really accurate for how modern functions within the field operate. They're very different than kind of those legacy stereotypes of the past. And so I think the biggest takeaway is that, HR is actually, there's a variety, I kind of break it into three main fields. You have the leaders, and those are the people that are really, transforming business. They're essential functions within the organization. They're business functions, frankly, that focus on people. There's the laggards, and that's still probably more of the personnel, transactional, administrative, reactive. Often when you hear the negative stereotypes of HR, they're applying that to that sect of the function. And then the vast majority are in the middle. And that's a group that, aspires to be in that leader category, but they have to overcome some obstacles, whether it's budget, resources, executive and leadership buy-in, et cetera. But I think that's kind of my biggest takeaway is that, you can't, it's not a monolith. You can't say, HR is this and speak broadly to the industry because there's so much nuance depending on kind of where they are in the evolutionary curve.
Such an interesting point. And if we think about any adoption curve and follow the traditional parabolic curve, what you're describing essentially are the early onsetters, the laggards, and the people who recognize that HR is an evolving, non-homogeneous process. And there's so much more for us to uncover about how do we actually treat people at work? How do we operate efficiently and effectively together? And I think there's so much excitement that's going to come out of your book. I genuinely believe that. I'm excited to pick it up myself. What I'd be curious to learn is who your target audience is, because it's easy to say it's HR. But what I believe is possible and why I wanted to bring you on today is to help educate people that are outside of HR, what the inside world looks like, what it can become, how to better partner with them. Is that a good sense of who the audience for the book is?
Yeah. I mean, obviously HR people will buy it, but I don't really consider it an HR book necessarily. It's a business book. It's a book for people who are interested in what it takes to build great businesses, because you can't build a great business without a really solid and fundamental people team and people operation and employee experience and kind of all the things that modern HR thinkers think about and cultivate. And so, yes, the majority of readers will be in HR, but frankly, I don't, frame it as an HR book. I frame it as a business book, because if I'm a founder somewhere and I have this dream for a company, I better be thinking about the people side of that company in addition to, the products, the services, market fit, all those things that you traditionally think of and you're kind of taught to evaluate when you're starting a new business. You've got to have the people side of that right. And so really this book is a playbook for developing the people side of your business as you take your product, your service, whatever it might be, to market.
Awesome. So outside of the book itself and that focus, I want to make sure that we get a glimpse into how you started your career, because that's what it's really all about. And there's a lot of people going through the motions this year, have gone on their own version of a roller coaster, and 2021 isn't necessarily a stopping point. Our life is continuous, and it's been continuous for all of us. So let's rewind the clock a little bit and look at where you started and what were some of the biggest kind of challenges that you went through.
Yeah, I mean, if I took the clock all the way back to post-college, kind of beginning my career, I studied marketing and international business. In college, I thought that meant advertising. Like I thought I would get into creative ad work. But I knew I grew up in Florida. I knew I wanted to move to LA. I went to school at Florida State University. And so we had one company come on campus at our career fair that had an office in LA. I was like, I have no idea who they are, what they do, but they have an office in LA. I'm going to interview with them. And it was a company called Pencom Systems, and they were a technical recruiting agency. And I had no idea what recruiting was, but I, met the team and liked them, and they flew me to New York for an interview, and I was impressed by the people I met, and I thought, hey, A, this will get me to LA, so it'll meet that goal. But B, it sounds interesting, and I like technology. It kind of the firm taught you about tech and programming language, and so to me that was really fascinating, and found that I just fell in love with recruiting, and it really broadened from there. So I think the next big turning point for me was when I left corporate to go out on my own. I was never somebody who always thought, I can't wait to start my own company. Like I didn't view myself necessarily as having that entrepreneurial spirit. I thought, I don't want to work for myself. I want to work for somebody else. I want a steady paycheck. I want to work 9 to 5. I want my nights to myself and my weekends to myself. And as I grew up, went up the ranks in the corporate world, and Blackberries, were on our hips, and I'm dating myself with that comment, but we all had, Blackberries back in the day, and there wasn't 9 to 5. That didn't exist anymore. And so I probably started thinking about it then, like, okay, well, if I'm going to be working random hours, why not maybe see what I could build myself? And so after 3 years at NPR, the time was right. The role, they brought me in as in a kind of a transformation role. 3 years later, it was more of a maintenance role, and that's not, where I do my best work. And so I thought, let me give it a shot. And as fate would have it, my boss at the time at NPR was leaving NPR to become the head of HR at SpaceX. And he wanted me to move out there with him to run recruiting for him. But we'd already lived in LA twice at that point, and we're getting ready to start a family. And so I said, we're not moving back, but I can kind of, leave and start my own firm, which is something I've been thinking about, and help you do all those things, but just do it through Amplify as opposed to a full-time employee. And that was kind of, the rest, the rest is history, as they say, from there.
It's such a powerful and beautiful story. What I'm curious to unpack really is where the resistance might come in, because that's where the learning comes from. That's where your confidence came to actually even ask that type of question. Make sure you ask the question that lands you an opportunity to recruit for SpaceX through your own firm. Mm-hmm. So what were some of the biggest things that you've learned through what we would classify as a challenge?
Yeah, I mean, I think looking back, I made that move when my wife was pregnant with our first child. We were getting ready to start a family. It was an intense 6 months with SpaceX. And so I had a second apartment in LA. I was like, there was a lot of doubt in those early days of like, did I make a mistake? Like, was this the wrong thing for me to do? And I think it probably, like most new entrepreneurs, I don't know any who haven't had those moments of doubt. And especially in the early days when you're trying to like determine, like, do I have a sustainable, viable idea and concept? And is this gonna, will I be able to provide for my family, especially at that point for me as a new dad? I had to think about that my responsibility was greater than my own paycheck. And so I think in the first probably year and a half, I think I had those moments where, I'd have some gaps between projects and be like, oh no, like, am I not gonna be able to client now? Am I gonna have to go back in the house? And then, but you persevere through those. You find ways to make sure that you're still learning, you're still expanding your network, you're still finding ways to be valuable to your industry, in my case. And that helps you get through those moments. And so, now 7 years later, the business is much more established, mature, comfortable. And it's allowed me to create a lifestyle where, I can be present. I can be a dad. I can prioritize that. And also get involved in projects and obviously deliver great work for clients. But I'm able to kind of define and create my own experience as it relates to work and life and creative projects and editorial interests and outlets. And, there's no way I would have been able to design the life that I have now if I wouldn't have made that leap 7 years ago.
Again, so powerful, and it takes a lot of courage, right? And you alluded to this earlier, is that we all have different mentors in our life and support systems. And as you went through that process, I'm assuming outside of your wife, who else was there for you? Who were the biggest mentors, and maybe some of the things that they shared at the time?
Yeah, I mean, so what I did, actually, looking back, this is something that I'm really glad I did, is I thought about starting my own firm about a year before I actually did. Functionally, in terms of the subject matter expertise, I knew I was ready there. Like, I knew that I had a good grasp of the kind of work that I'd be doing. When it came to running a business, I knew that I had no idea what the hell I was doing as it related to that. And so what I did is, I determined the company name. I bought the domain. I locked down the social channels. I launched the company as a blog initially, so I could start doing brand building and kind of make people kind of connect the name of the company with me and vice versa through my writing, so that when I was ready to kind of formally announce it, it already had a bit of a brand platform. But what I did is I created an advisory board, if you will, of entrepreneurs and founders, just from my network and people I've worked with in the past or friends of friends. And I studied from them. I got time on their calendar, and I learned from them. Hey, what do I need to know as an entrepreneur, as a founder? What are things that are not intuitive, that are definitely not on my radar but should be? How do I think about invoicing? How do I think about pipeline? Like all those things that somebody in an in-house corporate role never has to think about, because those are just things you don't do. And so I think that kind of boot camp, if you will, really helped, so that when I was able to finally, make it official, even though I hadn't done those things, I had an idea of what they might be and what might come, and where the landmines, might live, so that I could, just be better prepared for the uncertainty of the endeavor of moving out and kind of going on my own. In terms of specific advice, there was a lot of it. I think one of the best pieces of advice that I certainly leveraged was like, don't fall in love with your early ideas. Meaning, like, don't lock into rigidly exactly what you think your business will be before you've actually taken it to market and pressure tested it with like what clients want and what they need and where you actually fit. So obviously have an idea, have a vision, but don't be so rigidly locked into that you don't have the opportunity to learn on the fly quickly and adapt, where your business sits in the ecosystem.
That's such an important reminder. And what I always share with my clients is that we need structure with flexibility, right? We need to have some sort of boundary condition which we're operating, but be able to listen to the market, as you said, and pressure test it. And what I love about that story is that you evolved. I think, including myself, any entrepreneur that starts a business envisions, let's start it a little bit with a blog if you're in the online world, and you pivot and you learn and you evolve and you go through that entire process. So what I find fascinating is that you can take any domain and really plug it into that system, and some sort of learning, assuming we look at it through that lens, happens, and then out comes this beautiful project, assuming you stay consistent with it.
Yeah.
The hardest part is consistency. So for you, how do you overcome some of those mental blocks, right? Because they all pop up and kind of percolate throughout everyone's life, and we struggle and we kind of create the suffering state for ourselves. But you strike me as somebody who's able to persevere and kind of remove a lot of those blocks. So what really works for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that growing up, I've experienced a lot as a child, and that taught me resilience early on. And so, I think having that muscle memory built at a young age allowed me to not get derailed by setbacks and not get paralyzed by self doubt. Like, especially in my business, it's primarily consulting. Right. So it's a knowledge-based business. I'm not building a product that I have to, determine like this, do people really want this thing? Like I know that there's a need for the services that I provide, and I know that I have the capability to provide them. So I think that helped overcome a lot of those periods of self-doubt. And, you have, and anybody who does consulting work, you'll have droughts. Right? You'll have periods where you don't have business. You'll have periods where you don't know when your next thing is going to sign. And like that's nerve-wracking. And I think for a lot of people, that's the place where that usually happens, right? Where you're usually like, oh my God, like what happens now? What happens if I don't sign somebody next month or the month after? I think one of the things that I did early on, which is another piece of advice from one of those advisory board people I mentioned before, was building, as a new entrepreneur, be as thrifty as you possibly can to build a robust emergency fund, or I believe as he referred to an FU fund, meaning that, if you're in a position where you don't want to be in a position where you have to take whatever project comes along because that's what you need to feed yourself. You need to be able to have, focus and prioritize building a bit of a cushion. So you just have that buffer. So when times are lean, and they will be lean from time to time, that doesn't set you off on a panic path, right? You can weather that financially. That, the work you need to put in to, rebuild your pipeline or bring in more clients. So, but having that, once you establish that as an entrepreneur, you have that peace of mind, I think, that goes a long way in staving off those demons that, you can't do it or you failed or it's, tragedy is around the corner.
Yeah, absolutely. So those demons often pop up. And what I like about what you said is there's an element of planning that goes into it, right? Understanding that the basics of human life is basically, excuse me, is that we need food and water and shelter. And if you can afford that for yourself, get through the basics, you're in a pretty good spot. And
Yeah.
having the fortitude to develop a plan for that is the number one thing I'd recommend to anyone. It's probably the biggest lesson that many, let's call them millennials and Gen Z, have learned this year, is that the importance of a rainy day fund. I think there's a statistic that about 20% of the population didn't have more than 2 weeks worth of savings. So if you're listening, I'd say step one before starting any business or pursuing kind of a more riskier career choice, then develop that portion of it. Throughout everything that you've learned, both in your career as well as in starting a business, short of being a financial advisor, what are like the fundamental basics that you would recommend around finance as it comes to starting a business, or how you look at finance as a whole?
Yeah. I mean, I think you've got to have, a budget. You have to know where your money is going. You have to know what your kind of committed spend is. You have to know, like, some people get super sophisticated around this and they can tell you like the average, marketing or output spend to acquire one client. I couldn't tell you that. Like, I don't know at that level of granularity, but I know what I have going out. I know what I have coming in. I know what my general expectation is from revenue per client or per project. So I know essentially how many projects I need in the course of a year, to be comfortable, in our life. And so have visibility in that, check regularly, whether you're using, FreshBooks or whatever it might be to track your finances, just understand what that is. And, be mindful of, especially in the early days, every dollar you spend matters. So, ask yourself twice before you purchase something, right? And especially in my world, like I do lots of content creation, I do lots of design, I use all kinds of tools, and I love tools and I love tech. And so it's easy for me. I think when the pandemic hit, that had gotten away from me a little bit, and I kind of audited. I was like, oh damn, I'm paying for all these things that I'm not even really using anymore. And so I canceled a bunch of stuff, but like having that awareness of where your money is going and probably being a bit more judicious, especially in the early days around like, do I really need a Rolls Royce when I can get by with a Hyundai, to get this thing done? And I'm using that as a metaphor for purchase decisions. But yeah, I think just being cognizant and making sure you have that, visibility. And in some cases, it may help to actually have accountability. If you have a spouse, have those, conversations with your spouse. Make sure that you have, a transparent understanding around, money in and money out. That's an important aspect for entrepreneurs and families.
For sure. That high level financial literacy is really, really important. I mean, you can get as granular as you want, but I'd say that's the rudimentary and like fundamental thing that you need in life, let alone if you want to start a business. And as you mentioned, if you have a partner in life, make sure that you're aligned with them on what that is. So as we're kind of wrapping up a little bit, and we'll get to that in a second, I want to make sure we have a great picture of what your focus is for the following year. Because I always say that we need 2 or 3 overarching big picture goals in every calendar year. They're not necessarily resolutions, but they're things that we want to achieve that keep us motivated, keep us inspired. I know you're releasing your book at the end of January. What else is on the horizon for you?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm usually one of those guys that would rattle off like 2 or 3 or 4 things to that question. And typically year over year, like I would have that. I'm trying to be very intentional in 2021 to really be focused on supporting the book. And, and also like for me, the book isn't so much about, oh, I want to be an author and I'm going to, make it rich off book sales. Like I'm not. Like it's not that the book to me isn't about money. It's about impact. I think the book in a lot of people's hands will allow them to make a greater impact in their role and to their business and to their employees. And that there's something noble in that. And so for me, that's really what I'm leaning into. And obviously, it's a pandemic. I'm not going to be doing a live book tour, which I intended to pre-pandemic. So I'm finding other ways to create moments of value and experiences of value to my network and my community associated with the book. So I'll be doing a series of fireside chats with leading experts in different disciplines in HR. They'll be free for anybody to attend, and then be able to ask questions. There'll be an interactive Q&A. So it'll be another way for me to kind of, again, accelerate the ideas around modern HR. And that's going to be my main focus in 2021, which, different from years past, where I've usually had 3 or 4 different things. I'm going to really try to be focused on this and be okay with that. Like, accept the fact that is worth my attention. And it's okay if there's 2 or 3 things that are rattling around my brain that I'm not going to get to in 2021. If they're great ideas, they're not going to age out, and I can come back to them later.
I love that. It's very singular and focused. What's the best way for people to join and attend some of those fireside chats?
So if you go to redefininghr.com, that's the hub for the podcast and the book, and there'll be a sign up list there. And then I'm still experimenting with some different platforms where I may be hosting it. So that part is TBD, but you can actually go to redefininghr.com and sign up for the mailing list. And I'll be sending updates to that.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that. We'll definitely make sure to share that in the show notes. Look, Lars, as you know, before we let everyone off the hook, we put all of our guests through the hot seat, where we're going to ask you just a few tailored questions to you and your life. So I want to ask you, are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Awesome. Lars, I appreciate you sharing all your wisdom, but I want to know, what is one hobby that you love and focus on that you might have never shared with anyone else?
I'm still pretty partial to skateboarding. I'm certainly not a kid anymore, and you won't see many ramps, but I love getting on a board. I love the freedom, the feeling. I've taken my daughters to the skate park a few times. So yeah, I would say that.
Subsequent question to that, just a caveat, who's your favorite skateboarder?
Tony Hawk. I mean, you got a legend, still a legend. He was a legend when I was a kid. He's still a legend. I mean, you gotta give it to him.
Awesome. If you had the opportunity to teach one class at Harvard Business School, what would it be?
Network equity.
Okay.
The importance of network. So it means to me that, in the world we're in today, where no matter how deep or wide your skills or experience go in a given field, you can't possibly know it all. And most roles, especially corporate roles, will require you to know things or answer things that are outside of your skill set. They just are. And so if you've been deliberate in your career and conscious about building and investing in your own network equity, building relationships, adding value to those people, so you're not just asking them for stuff, you're helping them, you become so much more valuable to your employer, to yourself, to your future. So that's how I view network equity. It's the ability to consciously develop and craft a diverse network that complements your skill sets and covers some of your gaps. So it allows you to tap into that knowledge and expertise when you need it.
Love that. if anyone's listening from HBS, make sure to hit up Lars. I think that'd be a powerful course. Look, one more for you. This one is more, let's call it philosophical.
Sure.
If you had a chance to go with your wife and kids and go to Times Square and have the opportunity to literally put up anything on all of the billboards, what would be that one message?
Be kind. Be kind. I think that, this has been a hard year for everybody. I think the last couple of years, in particular in the States, we've seen kind of a backlash against kindness. We've seen a rise of, cruelness and people, talking over people, shouting over people, diminishing others. And I think we need more kindness in the world. So I'll give you a fluffy answer, but it's what I believe in. I think, be kind. I think we could all be more kind and practice kindness with each other, with ourselves, with our neighbors, and even with people we don't agree with.
I love that. It's powerful and simple and clear. Lars, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure chatting with inspiring people who are doing meaningful thing in the world and are also kind. So I'm super excited for your book release. It's coming out at the end of January. We're going to share all that information with our listeners in the show notes. Lars, thank you so much. And as we always say on Career Meets World, go unleash your wildest potential.
Thanks, Edward. Thanks for having me on.
Of course.